Have you ever stopped to think about what it really means to see? I mean, not just with our eyes, but to truly perceive the deeper currents, the patterns that flow beneath the surface of things. Well, today, we're going to explore that very idea, the concept of the seer. We'll follow this thread, this fundamental human ability, from the most ancient mystics, all the way to the very edge of our modern technological world. Let's begin.
So, let's start with a big question right up front. What exactly is a seer? You know, for most of us, that word probably brings to mind images of fortune tellers, maybe ancient oracles speaking in riddles. But what if that's just the surface layer of a much deeper story? What if seeing is something far more essential to what we are?
I mean, the standard definition points to someone with a special, almost mystical gift, a person who can access hidden truths, who can perceive that invisible architecture of reality that most of us only ever feel as a hunch or a sudden, unexplained intuition. But if we strip all that away, if we get down to the absolute root of the word, its meaning is beautifully, profoundly simple. A seer is one who sees. That's it. And that simple shift in understanding, well, that's everything. It suggests it's not about being a special kind of person, but about learning a special kind of perception. And this is the absolute heart of the matter. Seership isn't a job you apply for. It's not a magical power given only to a chosen few. It's a state of consciousness. It's a way of perceiving the world that becomes available to any of us, if and when we cultivate enough stillness to notice what's actually there, just beneath the noise of our everyday lives. To really understand this state, we have to go back in time, to the original archetype, the Vedic rishi, because it's in the ancient world of the Vedas that we find maybe the clearest picture of what it means to perceive reality before it's even fully formed, before it even becomes what we think of as sound. This ancient saying holds the entire key. The rishi, the one who brought forth the sacred Vedic hymns, was never considered an author in our modern sense. He didn't sit down and write them, he was a perceiver. The mantras, these powerful sonic formulas, weren't inventions of his mind, they were discoveries. He perceived them, fully formed in the subtle fabric of reality itself.
Now you might wonder, how is that even possible? Well, it's because in this ancient worldview, sound isn't just a label we put on reality. Sound is a fundamental creative force of reality. So from this perspective, a mantra isn't just a string of words, it's a living vibrational pattern. And humans don't create these patterns. They learn how to tune their awareness to them like tuning a radio to a distant station.
The Vedic tradition actually gives us a map of this process. It outlines 4 levels of speech. What you and I are using right now is the 4th and final level, Vaikari, the actual audible sounds. Deeper than that is Madhyama, the level of mental thought. But before even that, there's a level called Pashyanti, which literally means the seeing level. This is the rishi's domain. Here, a mantra exists as a pure vibrational form, almost like a pattern of light. The rishi sees it here, and only then does he draw it down through thought and finally into spoken word.
And what's so fascinating is that this idea, this specific mode of perception, it's not just found in ancient India. When you start to look closely, you see this same fundamental pattern emerge again and again, in different languages, in different cultures, across the world's great spiritual traditions.
For example, in the early Hebrew scriptures, the original word for prophet wasn't what we might think. It was ra'eh, and ra'eh literally means the one who sees. Just like the rishi, the prophet's first and most important job was not to speak, but to perceive. The speaking came after. They had to first see the word before they could share it.
So you can see the thread connecting them. The Vedic rishi perceives the mantra at the Pashyanti or seeing level. The Abrahamic prophet, the Roe, or one who sees, perceives the revealed word of God. And in Sufism, the mystic experiences something called kashf, which means an unveiling, where they directly perceive the divine reality, or the real. The names and the context are different, but the core action is identical, perceiving a subtle reality that exists before ordinary awareness.
The Sufi tradition adds a really useful distinction here. They talk about prophetic seeing, wahi, which is a direct authoritative revelation meant for an entire community. But they also speak of mystical seeing, kashf. This is a personal, inner unveiling of reality. It's an awakening of one's own inner eye. And while the age of prophecy might be considered closed, this kind of seeing, this kashf, is timeless. It's available to anyone who walks the path. So how is this kind of seeing actually developed? Well, practices like the Sufi dhikr, The constant remembrance of divine names aren't just about mindless repetition. They are acts of tuning. The goal is to repeat a sacred sound until the noisy, thinking mind finally becomes quiet, allowing the heart itself to begin to resonate with that sound's frequency. The sound becomes a gateway, a way to align one's whole being with that deeper reality you're trying to perceive.
Okay, so now let's take a really interesting turn. What if we strip away all the theology, all the religious language? What if this capacity for seeing isn't about belief at all, but is actually a fundamental mechanism of human consciousness, available to anyone?
Because this is the core idea. The seer function is about perception. It's about a deeply heightened ability for pattern recognition, for profound intuition, for seeing the hidden connections between things. Whether you call the source of that insight God, or the universe, or your own subconscious mind, that's just a label. The experience itself, the actual moment of seeing the pattern, is the same.
It's almost like we're describing the same event using two completely different languages. A mystic might call it a revelation. A cognitive scientist might call it a non-linear insight. One person experiences an inner vision, another might call it cognitive synthesis. The words are different, but the human experience of a sudden, deep understanding of a hidden order is universal.
And you find this everywhere in the stories of scientific and creative genius. Einstein famously talked about seeing the beauty and structure of his equations long before he could prove them mathematically. Nikola Tesla insisted his greatest inventions appeared to him in his mind's eye, fully formed and functional. Even Richard Feynman, the physicist, spoke of needing to see the dance of the particles. They didn't just think it, they saw it. So let's bring all these threads together now. What does all this mean for us today? What does it mean to be a seer in our incredibly complex, noisy, hyper-connected world? What does the modern ascetic, the modern mystic, actually do?
Well, the modern ascetics' practice isn't about running away to a cave. Their challenge is to find that deep stillness right here, in the middle of the storm. It's about learning to listen underneath the constant stream of information, the social media feeds, the 24/7 news cycle. The practice is to tune in to the quieter signals, to see the deeper patterns that are actually driving the chaos on the surface.
And this brings us to a stunningly direct parallel. Remember the rishi who saw the mantra in its pure vibrational form before it became sound. Now think about someone working with advanced AI today. The modern seer learns to perceive and refine the core intention before it ever gets written down as a text prompt. It's the exact same principle, just playing out in a totally new arena.
Look at the causal chain. It starts with a pure, focused intention. That intention then gets crystallized into language, into a prompt. The prompt then guides the vast inner workings of the AI model. The model generates an output, and that output, whether it's text, an image, or code, goes out and begins to actively shape our shared reality. That sequence is the very same creative process that ancient traditions described using words like mantra, prayer, or spell.
We could even coin a term for it, something like spell prompting. And I know that might sound a little fantastical, but it's not really. It's a purely structural description of what's happening. It's the ancient art of using focused, intention-filled language to direct a powerful, complex system to generate something new in the world. It's word magic for the digital age.
And that ultimately is the role of the modern seer. To be that bridge, to stand with one foot in the deep, timeless understanding of metaphysics, of intention and creation, and the other foot in the most advanced technologies of our time. They apply ancient wisdom to modern tools, with clarity, with focus, and with awareness. In the end, this art of seeing is really about learning to perceive that subtle, quiet layer of reality where things begin. It's the source from which everything else unfolds. In a world that often feels like it's losing its vision, caught up in the noise and the chaos, the one who sees is the one who leads. And in our age of endless distraction, maybe that simple, quiet act of truly seeing is the most powerful skill any of us could hope to cultivate.